Hey, Chester.
Hey Danielle, how you doing? Glad to be
I'm
here.
doing great. Thank you. So happy to have you. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Danielle Scholl, Director of Client Experience here at Gehring Group and Bentech. I'm so excited to have you all participate in our webinar today. So I have to be honest, this is my very first webcam webinar. So I have my sidekick, Michaela Vaccaro, in the back end, making sure everything goes smooth today. Thanks, Michaela. We were so disappointed that we won't be able to see everybody in person this year for our Gehring Group Public Sector Summit. However, you haven't gotten rid of us that easily. We have a few of our topic speakers that have gone virtual with us, including our keynotes. Over the next few weeks, we're going to be releasing webinar invitations and working with our speakers to cover important topics that we normally would have covered in person. These webinars will be interactive and we will be providing you with opportunities for CE credits. Don't forget, we're still moving forward with our Bentech User Summit, currently scheduled for Wednesday, April 22nd. Be on the lookout for some additional communication from Michaela, our communications queen, coming soon. Now, with that said, you all know that our summit was supposed to be all about culture. I'm thrilled to introduce to you my friend, Chester Elton, who is going to be our keynote speaker, April 2021. Chester's going to be discussing today how to be engaged even in a crisis. Let's talk more about Chester. He spent 2 decades helping organizations engage their employees in organizational strategy, vision, and values. He's also been author of several leadership books, including Leading with Gratitude, All In, Parrot Principle, which have been both New York Times #1 and Wall Street Journal bestsellers worldwide. However, most proud he is of his 4 exceptional children, and even more proud the fact that they have now flocked the nest. Please help me welcome Chester Elton.
Oh, thank you, Danielle. Wonderful introduction. Delighted to be with you here today, and delighted that we have so many sponsors. We'll give a shout out to them at the end too, but of course, nothing happens without those great sponsorships. So, want to give them a special shout out. Thank you very much for your support, particularly in these unusual times. Well, Michaela is going to be running the slides for me, so if we can just jump to the first slide there, Michaela, that would be great. We're going to talk about being engaged even through these really unusual and really unprecedented times. And the question always comes out, what do we do next? How do we get through this? How do we survive? How do we come out even stronger? Well, I want to introduce you on the next slide here to my co-author, Adrian Gostick. I always joke that I'm Robin to his Batman. We've been writing for over 2 decades now, just over 20 years, on workplace culture, workplace engagement, and leadership. And it's really interesting, I think, especially in these unusual times, the principles that we learned through our journey over the last 20 years is going to be really helpful for you here today. On the next slide, I just want to show you our roadmap. So we published our book called All In, all about corporate culture. The reason why this particular roadmap, I think, is particularly important today more than ever is we did all the research for this book during the last recession in 2007, 2008. The lessons that we learned through there, clearly different than the lessons we're going to learn now, have some similarities. And so as we take you through this roadmap and are Leading with Gratitude latest research, I'm going to be talking about organizations that are really not very similar to what you do day to day at all. Don't worry about that. Think about what is the principle? How can I then take those leadership principles, those culture keys, and apply them to my organizations and the people that work with and for me? Well, we always talk about what does a winning culture look like? And so on the next slide, we give it a definition. An organization where people believe what they do matters and they can make a difference. And I always like to add on the end of there, and when they make a difference, it was noticed and celebrated. Now, as we talk about winning cultures and the principles of those winning cultures, I want to make you familiar with our database. So in 2007, 2008, we partnered with Willis Towers Watson. They had a massive database of over 8 million engagement surveys. What we did is we then took that database and we culled it down to the cultures and organizations that were 2 and 3 times more productive than anybody else in the database, and we culled that down to just over 200,000 engagement surveys, almost 300,000, right? So I want you to be really confident in the database and where we drew this information from. As we work with the really smart guys, that have all their PhDs, I will admit, Adrian and I do not have our PhDs in statistics. I did take a freshman class in statistics at university. I will admit I was in the half of the class that made the upper half of the class possible. Okay, so I want you to be really confident in the data. And as we talked to these, really smart PhDs in data, they said, the data that we're pulling is accurate within 0.05%. So again, have confidence in that. Well, as we move forward on the next slide, especially during tough times, this becomes really important. Now, we've been doing a lot of writing recently. And when you go through a crisis, there are a couple of things that need to be in place. They need to trust you, right? You need to have that trust built up, and you've got to have that empathy. Now, you can't just flip that switch. I know a lot of you have been working really hard in your organizations for decades to build up that confidence, to build up that trust. That will hold you in good stead as we get through these tough times. If we go to the next slide, this is really going to be the heart of what we talk about today. It's interesting. There have been viruses that have been contained and eliminated, right? The bird flu, right? That was an Asian epidemic, contained, wiped it out. The Ebola virus, it was in Africa, closed the borders, contained it, wiped it out. Didn't happen with COVID-19, right? It's gone global. So we've gone from risk elimination to risk mitigation. So if you think about what we have with the flu, we haven't eliminated the flu, we mitigate the flu, right? As treatments come online, as vaccinations come online, we will be able to mitigate it. At this point, the latest thinking is we'll probably never be able to eliminate it. It's gone too big, too fast. So when you think about that, what is your plan going forward? We know that eventually it's going to run its cycle and things are going to come in place. I want you to start thinking about what is your plan going forward. And here are some key elements. We talk about 200% accountability. What we mean by that is there's going to be sort of whatever you call it, the new normal, the new way of doing business, the new way of gathering. Social distancing is probably going to stay in place for quite some time. So I can hold myself accountable in social distancing. What 200% accountability means is I'm going to hold Danielle accountable as well. If I see her not doing social distancing or not covering her mouth when she coughs, it's incumbent on me to then step up. I had a really interesting experience just the other night. We're sheltering in place like everyone else. By the way, I'm in Summit, New Jersey, just across the river from New York City, the new epicenter of the virus. And in the question box, if you want to kind of type in, where are you sheltering in place? Where are you today? We'd love to know where you're from and where you're coming to us today, because different parts of the country obviously have different issues. Well, again, back to 200% accountability. My wife and I, we had to go to Home Depot, still open. And they said, look, we're taking all these precautions. So we did, we put on our gloves and we're doing the social distancing. Well, there were people in the store that were not social distancing. And it's amazing how disconcerting that can be for me as a customer, knowing that other customers aren't abiding by the rules. So in your plan going forward, start thinking about how is that accountability going to be monitored? How are you going to enforce it? And do you have a strong enough culture where you can get that buy-in, where if Danielle's not doing it, I can call her out, and it's not a punishment, it's a coaching, it's a help. I hope that makes sense. So start formulating, what does 200% accountability look like in my municipality, in the place where I live and work, right? Social protocols that are tied to the new mood. Do you have spacing? Do you have barriers? Do you have gloves? Do you have whatever it might be? What are those new social protocols? We all cough into our elbow now. It only took us 50 years to figure that out, right? So what is your signage going to look like? How are your people going to act? And how are you going to make people feel safe? Your residents, your customers, however that plays out. If they don't feel safe, the interaction becomes really difficult, right? If they don't feel safe. So again, Start thinking about from your constituents' standpoint. When they come into our offices, when they're allowed to come back into our offices, when they use our various facilities, when they're at police stations, when they're at the fire station, when they're at, I love our dump is now the transfer station. I love a Rose by any other name. We love our transfer station. It's closed now. So what is the new normal going to be? Is it going to be pick up at the curb? When we're at there, what does social distancing look like at the transfer station? How are you going to keep your customers safe? And how do you relay that message, right? And then the new transaction options. You know, are you going to have a card? Is it going to be digital? Is it going to be all on the web? Those transactions that you used to do via paper, are those going to disappear? What does that look like? These are things that you should be thinking about now. Some things are going to go back to normal. Some things are not. And more than ever, you've got to start thinking about how safe am I keeping my people that work with and for me? And again, how safe am I keeping my constituents, my customers that come? And if you've got some ideas, by the way, feel free to put them in the questions, some things that you've been doing. Really want this to be as interactive as we can with 134 people. We want it to be a time to share best practices along with hopefully pick up a plan for where you're going next. Well, if we can go to the next slide, I want to share with you some real-time examples. I don't know how many of you have been to Texas Roadhouse. We're big fans. They've been a customer of ours for a long time. If you've ever been, it's peanuts on the floor, it's music, it's the rolls are unbelievable, the butter is incredible, the hand-cut steaks, the margaritas, the beer on tap. And there's Kent Taylor, who's become a good friend of both me and my co-author, Adrian Gostick. And we're working on a project with him right now, started a few months ago. Now we're in the middle of the coronavirus. But you got to understand that Kent Taylor, I'm sorry, I've got a friend, Kent Murdoch. This is Kent Taylor. Kent Taylor loves a party. He throws a party like nobody else. And so his restaurants are parties. He started to do curbside. And while he engaged in curbside, he said, you know what? In a bag, you don't get a party in a bag. You know, you don't get the music, you don't get the peanuts, you don't get the line dancing, you don't get the crazy, servers and so on. And so while he knew he needed that to be a part of his business, wasn't as passionate about it because there's not a party in the bag. Well, now you've got to have a party in the bag. So he's made that pivot. Be aware that you're going to need to make pivots and you're going to need to go and you're going to need to take your people with you. And that's where the trust comes in. Do they trust you? Have they got your back, right? Because if they do, they will come with you and they will trust you to go. So now all of a sudden, Ken says, we got to pivot. Here's what he did that I love, and I recommend that you do this. He's got 600 restaurants, almost 80,000 employees. First and foremost, he said, the first thing we got to do is we got to keep everybody employed. How are we going to do that? We've got to create a curbside service second to none. So he says, here's what I do. I call my crazies. I love that. You know, be a crazy. You know, the people that think outside the box, right? He says, so I call my crazies.
We all have crazies, Chester. We all have crazies.
Excellent. That may be Daniel's new title, Daniel the Crazy Scholl. So here's what he does. He calls them up and he says, what are you guys doing? The guy says, you know what? We got to get curbside service going. In this particular location, he's got a huge parking lot and he's got a big back wall on his restaurant. He says, we got permission from the municipality to show movies at night. And so he went through the copyrights and all that. What movies can you show? What movies can't you show? And he says, in our parking lot, we blocked out every other space. Social distancing in your car. He wants people to feel safe. And of course, while you're watching the movie and taking a break from all the crazy free movie, if you should want to have some, I don't know, a baked potato or a steak, feel free to, text us, call us. We'll run it out to your car. We'll keep everybody safe. He said, great idea. Now, he thinks, I just heard this from him today. I think it's phenomenal. Collect information from everywhere and anywhere. So he's talking to his crazies. He's going to curbside. He's talking to customers. He's talking to the cooks. He's talking to the servers. He's talking to the waitresses and on and on and on. He decides to camp out at the grocery store. Grocery stores are open. What are grocery stores doing? How are they keeping people safe? How are they working through this, right? Guy comes out, he says, hey, how was your experience in the grocery store? He says, I loved it. You know what? No steaks, no fresh meat. Kent goes, I got all kinds of fresh meat. Tell you what we're going to do. We're going to start selling you our hand-cut sirloin steaks. You can order them up, take them home, barbecue them up. The reason I give this to you, I know you're not in the restaurant business. I give it to you because you got to start thinking out of the box. The last big crisis. Let's go to the next slide, WD-40. This is Gary Ridge, Garry, one of my favorite CEOs of all time. He's an Australian. To meet him is to love this guy. Their headquarters is in San Diego. 2008, recession hits. He starts visiting his various research facilities and so on. And they start asking him, Gary, are you okay? Are you okay? How are you doing? Are you okay? He goes, no, I'm fine. I'm good. It gets to the point where they've asked him so many times that evening he calls his wife from his hotel and he goes, honey, do I give off a sick vibe? Like, do I give off like an ill, unwell vibe? People keep asking me if I'm okay. She said, honey, they're not asking you, are you okay? They're asking, are we okay? Are we going to be okay? He says, and I love this. He said, you know what? Then it occurred to me, let's not waste a good crisis. you gotta love that optimism. Let's not waste a good crisis. What can we learn? What can we do? Everywhere our people go, they're going to hear about the horror. When they come to work with us, they're going to hear about hope. Boy, the work you do in your communities and stuff, be the good news. Talk about, hey, we've solved this particular problem. Hey, we're going to be opening the transfer station. Here's how we're going to do it. We need you to buy in. Here's how we're going to communicate it. We're going to continue with the census. Here's how we're going to do it. We're going to continue with the garbage pickup. We'd really appreciate if you do this for our workers to keep them safe and keep you safe. See what I'm saying? Be the good news. What can we learn? Let's not waste a good crisis, because there's going to be stuff coming, information come in that's going to make you better, more efficient, and more trusted going forward when you do it right. Well, on the next slide, I want to show this to you. And I know earnings aren't as big a deal where you work. Here were the rules. No lying, no faking, no hiding conversations. Leave the pillows at home. We're going to be candid. We're not going to be cruel. We're going to be candid. No pretense. Listen, this is a crisis. And when you think about it, this has never happened before. Not only in our lifetimes. I mean, you got to go back to the bubonic plague for stuff like this. And it's not nearly as bad as that, right? How will you be recorded? How will you be remembered as a leader, as a community? How did you handle the crisis? Was it woe is me? Was it shock and awe? Or was it, hey, we're here to help. We are here to help. I love Mr. Rogers. When he was a kid, he said, Mom, when I listen to the news, I get all this bad news. And she said, yes, there is a lot of bad news out there. And when there's bad news, son, look for the helpers. There are always people helping. And you know what you do in your municipalities, you are the helpers. People are looking to you. So communicate every day. You say, oh, well, you can over communicate. People get tired of it. No, they don't. Particularly if you're giving them information that's important for them in keeping them and their households safe. And by the way, no better time to focus on people development than now. No better time than now. Coach them up, do some mentoring, give them the information. If there's some online certifications and courses and whatnot, and you can invest in that, do it. Share that knowledge, share those best practices like I hope we're going to be doing in our time together. What were the results? So on the next slide, it's just amazing. What they went from is record earnings, right? They survived, they had record earnings, and when they came out of it, get this, 99% employee engagement, 99%. It was a time to gather everybody in, get them to buy into the noble cause. Here's how we're going to do it. Here's how we're going to get through it. It was amazing. And by the way, since then, they've had a 300% increase in their market cap. They literally went from a $280 million company to a $2.8 billion company in a span of about 12 years. Now, I give you those numbers just to show growth, development, and impact. And I hope it makes sense. Well, so let's pull out something really current. On the next slide, the guy that's doing it really well right now is Governor Cuomo. He's been calm, he's been informative, he's been reassuring, he's authoritarian when needed. You know, those shutdowns, those early calls to shut down the restaurants and the bars and whatnot. He's got a few things more that he can do that'll be even more radical and more disruptive and yet necessary. And because he was early on very communicative, very trustworthy, right? Very calm, he'd say, look, this is a problem, no doubt about it. We are not the problem, we have a problem. And we together are going to solve this problem. The great thing that Governor Cuomo has done in real time is he's brought in all these experts to educate him and educate his staff. What can we do? What are the first things we need to do to flatten the curve? What do we need to do for our hospitals? What do we need to do for capacity? What do we need to do to keep our policemen and our firemen safe? How do we best communicate? How do we handle our airports, our train stations, our bus stations? How do we handle the taxis? New York, full of taxis, right? How do we handle that in a way where we can keep the city running and yet keep our population safe? Now, I'm sure in your municipalities, there are varying degrees of this depending where you are in the country, right? Some it's more severe. I'm in Summit, New Jersey, right across the river. New York, you know, the US is now the new COVID-19 epicenter, and New York is the epicenter of the epicenter. We have a lot of friends and family that live in New York City. We're in constant contact. What do you need? How are you doing? What are the latest restrictions? If you would, in the question box, and we'll be monitoring it, because we've got, you know, Key Largo, Florida. Thanks, Edie, for popping that in. We want you to share some of your best practices. What were some of the best ways you communicated? How did you do this sense of urgency and yet not get people to panic? Port Charlotte, Florida. Russell, thanks for popping that in. So let's just go to the next slide here really quick. Here are some of the best practices. We got Sarasota. Is that supposed to be FL? Because Anna Maria, you put GL. I don't know what state GL is. So I think it's Sarasota, Florida. Florida's representing. Good for you guys. So this idea of sharing everything. Sometimes you can't share everything, right? Sometimes it's either not appropriate or you don't have enough information to make that information accurate and helpful. I get that. Share what you can. Share what you can. And it's really interesting. That openness leads to trust. A lack of openness leads to more fear. Jacksonville, Florida stepped up. That's awesome. And Anna Maria, yes, it was a typo. Thanks for that. Send regular updates to your clients and your staff. And now, here's what's interesting. Well, we don't have anything to share. That's something you should share. I know that sounds crazy. Even when there's not much to share, because in a void, when there's a void, where do people jump? They jump to the negative. We just do. That's human nature. It's human nature, right? Lastly, be more open about what you are up to in your meetings and other activities. Don't get siloed. You know, in your municipalities, what are the police doing? What's the fire station doing? What's the transfer station doing? You know, what's DMV doing? Whatever it might be. Make sure you're coordinating, because people can get easily confused if the rules when they're in one place are different than the rules in another place. Does that make sense? And again, please share with us some of your best practices. I know you're doing some amazing work out there, and we'd love to share it. And we've got the U.S. Virgin Islands popped in. Awesome. Next slide, just really quick, if we can. A few more things around sharing everything. Now, as leaders, people are going to look to you for accurate and the right information, right? This trust grows when there are misunderstandings. So ask clarifying questions, right? Here's what we're going to do. Is everybody clear? Is there any doubt? Do we have any questions? And then you might even say, even though there aren't any questions, you know, Laura Nolan from Jacksonville, I'm going to call you. Repeat back to me what our process is. I just want to make sure, I don't want to embarrass anybody. I just want to make sure everybody's got the right message. Because when employees are unsure, that's when they start to have doubts. They start to have suspicions, and that's where trust breaks down. And when trust starts to break down, it gets very difficult to get people to do things. And you don't want the rumor mill. The last one there. Rumors take the place of facts. You can't let that happen. You've got to make sure. Now, information does change. Things do change, right? And it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to try to manage that rumor mill. We got West Palm Beach. We got North Palm Beach. Awesome. Awesome. So let's go to the next slide here really quick.
Actually, Pastor, I just want to interject real quick. We had somebody include something that they're actually doing in their municipality, and their suggestion was including a video of yourself talking to your team with regular updates, keep the human face-to-face message and to communicate empathy. So thank you for that. We appreciate the suggestion.
You know what? That is so excellent. You know, when you can see people, you can read their body language, right? Sometimes when you're just on the phone, particularly if it's just an email, you know, basically about 80% of the information in any email can be misinterpreted because there is no tone of voice. Phone is great, you get tone of voice. When you add the body language, makes all the difference. That's a great suggestion. And you know, Zoom offers you 40 minutes free. You can even get a whole team on, you know, on Zoom, and you can see everybody and you can call them out and get people to participate. That's an excellent best practice. That was from Matthew Hammond. Thank you, Matthew. Okay, I want to talk to you a little bit again about lessons we learned from the last recession. Largest survey ever done, mentioned to you, 2008, 2009, just over 300,000 people surveyed. Let's jump to the next slide if we can. So the question that we wanted to look at in this research that we did is, how do great cultures get their people involved and engaged in tough times? Jump to the next slide here, and we're going to leave plenty of time for questions. Our first big aha was, we talk a lot about engagement. Are my people engaged? I love that. We learned and we discovered from the research, engagement is great. Enablement and energize are the other two key factors. And if we go to the next slide, I want to give you some definitions about that. So, strong attachment to the organization. I will give you discretionary effort. You know, I'm engaged. I'm thinking about solutions. You know, I show up a little early, I'll stay a little late, not a big problem. I'm enabled to do my job. I have the training, I have the resources, right? I've got a mentor. My phone works, my laptop works, the internet is strong, whatever that might be, right? So it's really interesting to enable your people to get the job done, right? You don't want to be asking people to do stuff and then they don't have the tools to do it. Well, they get frustrated. It becomes distrustful. Clearly, you don't know what it takes to get my job done, and on, right? And then lastly, energize. And this is an easy dot for you guys to connect, right? Or easy dots for you to connect. A greater sense of drive and purpose. What is our noble cause? I mean, you guys are right on the ground floor. You are where democracy works, right? You are where, you know, the votes matter. You know, your local politicians matter. Your residents are right there. It's not ethereal. You're not in DC. You know your residents, their friends, their neighbors, your kids go to school together. This sense of purpose, we're keeping each other safe. We're keeping each other healthy. We're going to get through this. We're going to build bonds stronger than ever. Well, on the next slide, it's really interesting. And again, this is operating margins. This is just an indicator of productivity, right? Organizations with low engagement have about a 10% operating margin. You add engagement, jumps up to 14.3. That's great. When you add enablement and energy, productivity doubles. Engagement becomes more meaningful because I'm not just doing it because it's my job. I'm doing it because there's a purpose here. I'm keeping myself and my neighbors safe. Great. Next slide, just quick, and we're going to open it up to questions here in probably in about 5 or 10 more minutes. As you see this slide build, which is really great, we wanted to look at what does engagement look like, right? Well, back that up. Yeah, what does engagement look like? What are the key drivers? Number one was opportunity and well-being, an opportunity to grow and develop and learn. I have a sense that people care about me. This is a great place to work. Trust, you know, if you don't have trust, you don't have much. And then pride in what we do, our noble cause, which was fascinating. What we wanted to look at is what are the drivers of the drivers? Alignment drove pride. In other words, we keep our promises, right? We get things done. We're respectful. We do it in a way that's civil and kind. Communication is all about trust. Again, lack of communication breeds lack of trust. Appreciation, and this is what we're gonna wrap up with here. Fascinating that the number one driver of the number one driver, which was opportunity and well-being, was there was an expression of gratitude, appreciation, recognition, whatever you want to call it, in the workplace, at least once every 7 days, which, by the way, is not a lot. And I would submit to you that in a crisis, you need to triple, quadruple, or even take that 10 times higher. Okay, so as we go to the next slide, I want to show you a perfect example of the latest research we did in our book, Leading with Gratitude. Now, we've got a lot of free resources associated with this book. I know budgets are tight. If you go to leadingwithgratitudebook.com, all kinds of white papers and stuff that you can download and share with your organizations at absolutely no charge. So jump to the next slide. In tough times, you know, leaders need to master the art of gratitude. You got to engage the hearts and minds of your people, focus on the right behaviors. Nothing reinforces the right behavior better than gratitude. And again, keep hope alive. Paint the picture. We are going to get through this. Today was a tough day. Tomorrow's going to be better. Tomorrow's going to be hopefully a little less tough. We're going to get through this. And we call it Gratitude 101, which is the next slide. And we can jump through that really quickly. I want to share with you one of the great leaders that we had the privilege to interview in our research for this book. His name's Alan Mulally. Some of you may know Alan. He was the guy that saved the iconic automobile manufacturer Ford. And it's really interesting. He came from the aerospace industry. He came from Boeing. He'd taken them through 9/11 and that crisis. Here's what's really interesting. He's coming into Detroit. And by the way, I lived in Detroit for a while. And the automotive industry, it's sharp elbows. It's rough and tumble. And here's this engineer from Indiana showing up and saying, you got to understand, guys, my management philosophy is it's all about your people. Love them up. Love them up. Now, that sounds like a soft skill and a nice to have. Trust me, it is a must have. Now, we didn't test this before, so click on this one more time and let's see if we've got this audio of Alan talking. Nope, it's okay. Go to the next slide. So let's talk about Ford for a minute. What I love about this little audio clip we had of Alan is he says, you know, it's all about your people. It always has been. It always will be. If you don't have their hearts and minds, and the way you get their hearts and minds is you love them up. Now, here's the key. Lest you think that Alan Mulally was a soft leader, guess again. As they wrote up, you know, his journey to saving the Ford Motor Company, they would talk about Alan Mulally as someone who had a spine of titanium. He was demanding, and yet at the same time, very encouraging. You don't have to sacrifice one to get the other. In fact, I think they enhance each other. And let me explain to you how that works. 2006, employee engagement at Ford is 20%. All kinds of problems with the union. They had all these different businesses operating all over the world. You know, they had Volvo, they owned Range Rover and Jaguar, all these little fiefdoms, they were all competing against each other. They were on schedule when he took over in the summer of 2006 to lose $17 billion that year. So what he did, and we'll jump to the next slide, this is his accountability formula. They would meet every week and they'd say, here are our projects, and we have a very simple color code. Green means we're on track. Yellow means we've got a plan, we're not on track yet. Red means we're in trouble and we need help. So he brings his executives together. He says, look, there's a new system. It's going to take them a while to figure that out. First meeting, every chart, every square is green. He goes, well, that's interesting. He starts explaining to them again, look, when you need help, you need to call for help. Second meeting, everything's all green. Third meeting, everything's all green. And Alan backs up and he says, guys, you know, we just lost $17 billion, right? How is it possible that it's all green? How is that possible? And then Mark Fields, who was the North American president at the time, on the next meeting puts up a red square. And there's a gasp in the room. See, because in the automotive industry, nobody admits vulnerability. Nobody. In fact, it was the perfect way to end your career. The red square shows up. Alan starts the slow clap. He gave people permission. And if you look at the bottom of the slide there, you have a problem. You are not the problem. How do we rally around? When you've got a great culture and you've got issues in your municipalities, right? Let's solve the problem. Let's not worry about who to blame. Here's what we know. We got a problem. And I love this. This was another webinar we were doing. They said, you know what? As leaders, we could be good problem solvers. One leader shared with us, she said, you know, look, by myself, I think I'm pretty smart. Collectively, we can be Einstein. What's the problem? Let's solve it. Another leader said, you know, I don't like to think of them as problems. I like to think of them as puzzles. Let's get the puzzle. We've got all the elements. We've got all the assets. How do we put them together to make the puzzle, right? WD-40, we don't make mistakes. We have learning opportunities. In fact, and by the way, this will win you a bet in a bar. And type it in if anybody knows. What does WD-40 stand for? Does anybody know? What does it stand for? If you get it right and you give me a mailing address, I'll send you a free copy of our new book. Does anybody know what WD-40 stands for? Can you see anything there, Danielle?
I'm looking, we're still waiting, and I'm going to raise the stakes, and Gary Group's going to throw in a promotional item for you as well.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, you know what? Let's move forward.
So hold on, I got one that said, isn't it the number of times he's attempted to make the solution?
Yes, that's what the 40 stands for. What does the WD stand for?
Let's see. Another one, I know the 40 is because they messed up 39 times. Well-developed, water displacement. I got a couple water displacement.
Ding, 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 ding.
Ding, ding, ding.
We'll give away 2 books. Whoever got the 40th formula first, there's 1 book, water displacement. The reason I bring that up is, he says, were those 39 mistakes or screw-ups? Absolutely not. Those were 39 learning opportunities. When you have a culture where it's okay to make a mistake, as long as we learn from it and move on, you get more innovation, you get more buy-in, and you create a psychologically safe culture where people want to come to work, they want to help you solve problems. Well, 2 more slides, and then we're going to open it up to discussion for the last 15 minutes here.
Sounds good. And I do want to thank Sherry Walker and Janice Davis for answering those questions for us. Thank you, guys.
Excellent. Good job. Good job. So Ford, through the crisis, comes out on the back end. He said, look, focus on small wins, share everything, stay optimistic, the one Ford culture, the one Ford culture. Last slide. On gratitude Grinches. Sometimes we think, look, this is a crisis. We got to get hard things done here. I'm going to put the fear of God in my people and we're going to get stuff done. Well, short term, yes, that can work. Did a fascinating study. We said, when you are threatened, if your job is on the line, does your productivity go up? 37% said yes. We said, when you have a manager that is a micromanager and super demanding, does your productivity go up? 38% said yes. Here's the number I want you to remember. When your leader, supervisor, manager, whatever titles you use, expresses sincere gratitude and appreciation on a regular basis, how much more likely are you to perform? 83% said yes. 83%. You can get short term from 37, 38% of your people. You want 83% buy-in? Use gratitude, lead with gratitude. And here it is right here from Alan. By withholding our gratitude in tough times, we end up shooting ourselves in the foot. We need to jolt ourselves out of our self-centeredness. When we are more grateful, everyone's more engaged, focused, and productive. More than ever now, be appreciative and grateful for your people that show up every day and do those hard things in an era where we just have never seen this before. There's a lot of doubt, there's a lot of fear. Be the good news, be the news that they can count on, celebrate those small wins along the way. And in conclusion, as we open it up to questions and ideas, we love our research, we love our data. If you follow this roadmap, I promise you, you'll have a more productive, engaged workplace. People will buy into your noble cause, you will build trust. Don't leave your best self at work. When it's all said and done, please take these principles home to the people that mean the most to you, your families, your inner circle, your coaches, your teachers, your ministers. Those people need that too, now more than ever. Be grateful for them and lead out because they need you just as you need them, probably now more than ever. Well, that's my story and I'm sticking to it, Danielle. So
Thank you. That was amazing. And Chester, I want to say it's really great to hear these things and these tidbits that you were able to give us today. I know at Garing Group and Bentech, we strive every day to stick our neck out for our clients, and our why statement is to be able to inspire and embrace our communities with new possibilities. And we really have made a huge effort organizational wide to put that stuff out there on our social media platforms such as LinkedIn, Facebook, as well as YouTube, hoping that by the good that we're doing in the communities, inspiring others to continue to do that good as well. So thank you. That was really awesome. So I think by now,
let me just say really quick, Danielle, I love the mission of your company and I love the way you guys do it. You bring a spirit and you bring that welcoming. And I'm just so delighted that you invited me to do this session. I'm delighted to know you guys.
Thank you. We feel the same way. So let's take a look at our Q&As and see if we have any questions. Just give me a second. So I have one question that came in that says, what can we do to engage with our team while they are temporarily laid off and the world is still uncertain and seemingly completely out of control? What would you say about that, Chester?
Great question, because you've furloughed some people, you've laid them off. The hope is you'll be able to hire them back. The worst thing that can happen is for those people to feel forgotten. Mm-hmm. And so find ways to reconnect. I love the simple phone call where you ask two simple questions. How are you doing? How are you doing? How are you and your family doing? And what can we do to help? I mean, you can't do everything for people. You can't write them big checks necessarily. What you can do is you can offer that emotional support and say, hey, here's what's going on. Let's stay connected. We're hoping as we get through this that there'll be some opportunities and whatnot. Don't forget those people. And because you didn't forget them in hard times, when things come back to whatever the new normal looks like, and you need them to come back, they will. They will. Mm-hmm. Stay connected. Whether it's a phone call, a little Zoom call, even dropping a little note in the mail. Hey, thinking about you and your family. Find ways and be very intentional about it and be very disciplined about it. I hope that helps.
Great, thank you. Another question that we received came in and says, what can we do to let people know we care and will be all right and be inspired about the future when delivering these temporary layoffs?
Yeah, the inspiration about the future is the key there. Here are the things we're doing now to put things in place. Here's the latest information. I'll tell you one thing you should be careful about is giving any kind of deadlines. We're pretty sure by the middle of April, we'll be hiring everybody back. You don't know that, and while you may feel like you're being optimistic, just say, here's what we know now. Here's what the curve looks like. I'll keep giving you information. And when people ask you, well, when will you be hiring again? Say, you know what, right now we don't know. As soon as we know, we'll let you know. Mm-hmm. And I think that free flow of honest and true information is the best thing you can do for your folks.
Okay, great. And the next one that actually just popped up is, as things return to the new normal, what are the things we should be thinking about and doing?
Again, I go back to one of our first slides where we talked about, what does the new normal look like? Start thinking about, Texas Roadhouse, it's got to be more curbside, right? How do we bring the party to the curb? When you talk about how are we going to start thinking about accountability, how are we going to be thinking about how we interact with customers? It's really interesting. You're seeing some of the retail stores are having to reconfigure where they're going to put their registers further and further apart. At the grocery stores, even though they're still open, you'll see some grocery stores, it's every other register that's open now, right? In this idea of trying to keep the spacing. Start thinking about the various aspects of your business I'll tell you another thing that's really important for you to think about is how are you continuing to build trust now for the next crisis? There'll be
Hmm.
another, and it may not be a virus, it may be something else. It might be, who knows? In a crisis, the thing that's going to hold you through it is, do your people trust you? Will they follow you? And that doesn't happen overnight. That happens over time. So how do we continue to keep people safe? What does the new normal look like? Do we need to change our physical facilities? Do we need to change the way we communicate? You know, some municipalities have gone to Slack really quick because it's a little quicker and faster than whatever they had. Is email still effective? Or are we communicating on a regular basis? Maybe we need to up that. Do we need to be having more virtual town hall meetings? Those are the kinds of things that I would really start to think about in a deeper way now, so that when the next crisis comes, we'll be even better prepared. Does that make sense?
Yes, no, absolutely. Thank you. Well, now the questions seem to be rolling in. So I want to go to the next one since we only have about 5 minutes left. Are there any ways to inflect change the way we communicate in writing and video if it's not available to keep our members engaged?
You know, if it's not available, I think you've got some really interesting issues. If you can't write, if you don't have video, if you don't have cell phone coverage, then you got to find a way to physically get there. And with social distancing or whatever it might be, let them know you're coming and try to have those conversations. Did I understand that question correctly?
Yeah, so we have some of our clients that don't have capability for video, so they don't have the benefit of being able to do webcam kind of chats or use Zoom or any of those type of platforms. So just trying to figure out if there's any other ways or ideas to help keep them engaged, even though they necessarily won't have that face-to-face interaction like we are able to have the benefit of due to the technology that some of us do have.
Yeah, there's always, if you have iPhones, there's FaceTime, right? You can do video on your phones. It's a little less reliable because you're relying on the cell towers and so on. Um, you know, it's old school, I know. Listen, drop a card in the mail. The
Hmm.
postal system is still working. Those little notes are always timely because people read them when they have the time. So get creative, and let's ask the group, what are some of the things in those situations that you've done that have been effective? I'd love to hear from the group here.
So funny that you just asked that because somebody just posted a comment saying that they've been doing coffee chats in the morning with some of their team members, which I think is amazing. I know specifically in our department at Garing Group and Ventec, we've been doing daily stand-up meetings. We call it latte time or tea time for some of us to keep us engaged and to really just start the day off cheerful. We share inspirational quotes and we share funny memes just to really kind of get the day started. And it's what we would really be doing, having that camaraderie back at the office in our icebox. So we're still trying to continue that. And I know specifically for us as well, we've been trying to do a lot of things through our internal channels with staying engaged through our wellness opportunities. We have a live stream, that we're doing with workouts and sharing and posting healthy recipes, doing wellness bingos. So for any of our clients that are interested in some of those activities that we're doing, be sure to circle back with your account manager or Joelle and Sarah, our wellness coordinators. We're happy to share any of that information that we're doing. I know we also have talks about doing Spirit Week. So surprise, Garing Group employees, if you didn't know that, we're interested in rolling some out just to keep our team engaged on a regular basis, because that's really what's important to us, is to make sure we continue that camaraderie and that connectivity that we're used to having on a daily basis.
I think those are all great ideas. A couple things that we do in our company is we've got a little hashtag find your gratitude. Help us make that go viral. And we every one of us posts a little photo at the end of the day, end of a long day. Here's something I'm grateful for. A funny one along with your coffee one, we talked about this yesterday in rehearsal, was I have a friend, they do wine and wine at the end of the day. At the end of the video chat, everybody brings a bottle of wine, and then they whine about, they get everything out, my kids are home, they're driving me crazy, teachers are so demanding and blah, blah, blah. And then it was funny, one of them said, yeah, we should probably have Hangover Friday because it was the wine crazy.
So, Chester, I have one last question that came in. And for those of you that submitted questions, thank you so much. We'll make sure that we get back to everybody on those additional questions. Do you have any tips we can give our employees now working from home to stay engaged with each other since we can't actually get together in person? Any other ideas that maybe you've encountered or some of your clients have shared with you?
Yes, and I'll tell you, and it's very simple and takes very little time, is just random texts. Just text, hey, thinking about you. And by the way, I've learned this long ago. When somebody's head or somebody's name pops into your head, just text them. Just act on it right away. Hey, just thinking about you. Your name just came into my head. How are you doing? Anything I can do to help? Phone calls are great if you've got the time. A little email things like you say, memes and whatever. Little touches. And by the way, in times of crisis, that needs to go up. Gallup says, look, it's one, recognition moment once every 7 days. I think you need multiple little touches every day at this point. There's so much coming down the pipe, and it can be so overwhelming. I'm like you guys, by the way. I go from ridiculously optimistic to absolutely petrified and terrified in a matter of like seconds, and that's when your network's got to pull you up, and that's where those little texts and those little things. I will tell you a funny quick story, and then we'll thank our sponsors again and so on. Is I was having a really tough day, and I just put an email out to 5 or 6 of my friends, and I said, I'm having a tough day. Would you send me a message and tell me I'm great? And they did. And one that I'll never forget, a good friend of mine, Mike Goodson, he goes, great doesn't even come close. In the pantheon of great, you are the Spartacus of great, and on and on. And I printed it out and I put it on and I said, you know what? Thank you. In that moment, I just needed somebody to reach out and say, you're great. Don't forget it. We'll get through this. You're going to be fine. Well,
Wonderful.
thank you so much, Danielle, for this time. I hope it's been helpful. We wanted to give one more shout out to our sponsors that have been wonderful through this whole thing. To Aetna, I've done a lot of work with Aetna, phenomenal. Cigna as well. Charge Snayer, did I say that right?
Chard Snyder.
Snyder, there we go. Humanida, Florida Blue Cross Blue Shield, Trustmark, Benefits Beyond Benefits, United Healthcare. Thank you so much, and thank you, Danielle, for all the good work you guys do at Gehring Group and Bentech. Love your mission. Love that we've had some time to spend with each other. If you guys need anything, feel free to shout out. We've got some fun tools that we're kind of giving away. We'll do that all through Danielle. Love the time we spent together. Last thing, take it home. Take it home. 3 things just to end. Be grateful, be kind, take it home. We're all in this together. We can get through it. It's going to be awesome on the other side. I promise.
Thank you, Chester. Just one thing of housekeeping I wanted to mention is that for those clients that attended our Seyfarth webinar last week, we are currently reviewing and organizing those Q&As, and we hope to get those to you by tomorrow. Thank you once again, Chester, to our sponsors, and most importantly, our valued clients and friends for choosing to be with us this afternoon. Thank you. Bye.